The Calgary Flames had my favorite draft out of anyone in the league, and I'm not exactly sure if it's even that close. At 9th overall, starting things off, they drafted Zane Parekh, and there's been a lot said about Zane Parekh this year, but drafting him at 9th overall, I totally see why. I had him a little bit later, and I think I have reason to do that, but the tools that he brings and the potential he has as an offensive defenseman in the NHL, it's just something that Calgary doesn't have, and I think he brings a lot of something that you do need in the modern NHL. I think as a second pair guy who can quarterback a power play and just put the puck in the net a lot, you could have done a lot worse with this draft pick. He grew on me over the course of the season, even though I still think there are some gaps in his game. I think he's going to be a player where the pros outweigh the cons, but both will certainly exist. He just has offensive zone vision unlike any other defenseman in this draft. He's got a shot that got him over 30 goals this season, and I do think that there's a lot of potential locked away in Zane Parekh's game that could be a real benefit for the Calgary Flames. At 28th overall, they drafted Matvei Gradin, and the longer I think about this, the more I like this pick. I just feel like Gradin is a player that has a long way to go in areas that I think are difficult to improve, surrounding mostly intensity level and mentality in the game. Gradin is a player that I found to be a player that cheated for offense a little bit, if I may say so, but when he had the puck and he could create in the offensive zone, he was a hard player to stop with some really high-end plays. If you're betting on upside and what you see at a player's best, at 28th overall, I can see why it would be Matvei Gradin. I might have gone in a bit of a different direction there, but I mean, when you look at who else they drafted in this draft, I just don't care that much, and I think if you're betting on the upside that Gradin has, it makes sense. I had him ranked quite a bit further back, because I do think that he might be a difficult player to see working in the NHL at some point, but he has all of the tools to get there, he's got the size to get there, everything is there, the ingredients are there. The meal just needs to be cooked. At 41st overall, the Calgary Flames drafted a player that I would have been happy with at 28 in Andrew Basha. It's the story every single year that remains the same. A slightly smaller player that plays with pace and skill and excitement and agility, just falls in the draft until someone just goes, well, we may as well take a chance on him here, right? Like, he's got to be better than most of these guys, right? And yeah, at 41st overall, Basha is probably better than a whole lot of players that went in the first 5 picks before him and the 5 picks after him. I love Andrew Basha. I think there's so much potential in his game. You can let him sort of lean into the offensive side of the game. I think he has all the skill in the world, all the pace in the world, all the intensity in the world, at least to put the ingredients together to become a really good offensive NHL winger. And at 41st overall and being the 3rd pick you have, I don't think they could have done much better than Andrew Basha there. At 62nd, they went in a bit of a different direction and took Jacob Battaglia. Now, this is a pick where I might have gone a little bit in a different direction, but when you take the whole class in aggregate, I can absolutely see why Battaglia would have been an interesting pick. I've been watching him since AAA hockey, and I've been a huge fan of him. He's physical, he's got some size, he has underrated skill that kind of goes unnoticed a little bit, and he can really hammer the puck from time to time when I've seen him with Kingston. I think there's a lot of potential with him, and I don't really think there's enormous amounts of NHL upside, but I think he has all of the tools necessary to project as maybe a bottom 6 NHL guy that fills in and plays a physical role down the wings and has some flair to him as well from time to time. And yeah, again, as the 4th guy you're drafting, rounding out the very offensive leading players you've already drafted, I think Battaglia was a good option. At 74th overall, they drafted Henry Muse, who I had ranked higher than this, and I wasn't even that big of a fan of Henry Muse. I think this is an upside pick. I really don't know if he has the NHL tools to become an NHL player in the way that he plays in junior hockey right now, but that doesn't mean he can't get there. He is a player, like many others in this draft, who the tools might be lagging behind a little bit, but the mind and the hockey sense and the vision on the ice is really high end. I think Muse has a lot of potential, but the likelihood of getting there is gonna be steep for him. That said, I always am optimistic about players like him because I think players like him that move the puck like he does, see the ice like he does, and think creatively on the fly like he does certainly deserve recognition, and I think that there's really good potential for this pick, especially considering he's the 5th player that Calgary drafted, which is just wild to me. At 84th overall, Calgary drafted Kirill Zarubin, and I heard a lot of good things about Zarubin over the course of this season. He played on one of those teams in the Russian Junior League where they faced like 40 shots a night, and he was turning away a large percentage of them. He's a very big goaltender, and he looks big in the net. I think he's a player that needs to work on the athleticism a little bit and just refining those technical details, because I feel like he makes a lot of saves just by virtue of how big he is right now. But that's something that is easy to bet on. You give him 5-7 years in Russia to just keep getting better and better and better, and I think you're going to end up with a really interesting goaltending prospect here. The signs are bright. He checks a lot of the boxes that I personally look for in goaltenders, and if you wanted to pick a goaltender here, then great, go for it. At 106th, they drafted a player who I actually really liked this year, and I was equally parts surprised and just really happy got drafted in Trevor Hoskin. When I covered the World Junior A tournament for Puck Preps, in the work leading up to that tournament, Trevor Hoskin stood out to me as one of the most exciting players in that entire class, and at that tournament, he was simply dominant. Now, granted, he is a D+2 player playing in the Ontario Junior Hockey League, but this is a fast, skilled, and creative offensive player who I think does have an outside shot of developing into a decent NHL player. In my mind, I thought he might go undrafted. You keep an eye on him in college and maybe he's a free agent in a couple of years. He's committed to Niagara University, where I imagine he will immediately slot in to play a ton of minutes because it's not the best program, but I really do like Hoskin. I think this was a very interesting pick that raised a couple of eyebrows amongst Flames fans and amongst people in the crowd. And the person I was sitting with when Calgary drafted him and I told him who he was also raised an eyebrow. But I do really think that Hoskin is a very interesting bet. So kudos to the Calgary Flames for taking a chance on this guy, and whoever highlighted him and pushed to draft him, I'd be very curious to see what that person sees in him, because I enjoyed Hoskin and I thought this was a weird place to take him, but I think it's a decent pick. But then at 150th, they drafted Luke Misa, and I asked around a little bit about why Luke Misa fell this far in the draft, and most people seemed to just say the same thing. He was on the list, but they had other names ahead. He was just small and didn't play super heavy hockey, so he's deprioritized a little bit, and that knocked him down and down and down and down and down. And again, it's a trend. Teams will prefer to look for size and physicality and something more raw but they can build around, rather than just something screaming at them that can produce offense at high pace, high speed, with others being involved in offense and just driving great results. And Luke Misa already has been making waves, granted at development camp, but I mean, at 150th overall, I'd be screaming to draft this guy. He's fast. He's aggressive with his offense. He's got tons of skill. He was well over a point a game this year and certainly helped elevate a guy like Porter Martone to the levels that we've seen him this season. I think this is a great pickup at 150. Maybe there's the chance that the physical side of the game overwhelms him or something. I'll take that at 150th overall. No questions asked. So I don't know what else to say at this point about Misa. I love him. I think he's going to have a very interesting trajectory from here, and I just can't believe that he fell all the way to 150th overall. At 170th, they drafted Hunter Lang. I think of all of their draft picks, this is the one that I kind of scratched my head at the most, but again, it kind of offsets the offense and skill that they kind of bet on with all their other picks. I just didn't see a whole lot to write home about with Hunter Lang that didn't really blow me away. So I don't know. I think we can move on from this. It was 170th overall, and maybe it's just a guy that can fill out your roster way in the future. But yeah, I don't know. Not much to say about Hunter Lang there, but I can't really complain. At 177th, they drafted Eric Jamieson, who I've also really liked as a re-entry in this year's draft. We just talked about Nate Miskey in the previous video. I think Eric Jamieson brings a little bit more to the game than Miskey does, but I think they're roughly comparable. As a re-entry, I do think Jamieson was one of the more interesting CHL players this year that I would have no problem drafting myself. He brings some size, he brings some good footwork under him, he brings a pretty heavy shot from the point, and I do think there's decent potential that he could develop into something at some point. So I'm sticking my neck out a little bit here, but I'm going to give Calgary a 1A. I really don't know how to fault what they've done in the draft this year. They took some really long shot bets, but on players that I would be making long shot bets on where they took them. I think they drafted a really impressive goaltender in Zarubin that could develop really well. I think Zane Parekh is going to play a very important role for the Calgary Flames in the next little while as an offensive defenseman. Gradin, Basha, Hoskin, and Misa are all really impressive, high skill, high pace players that have a ton of potential, and I could see a world where they are all playing NHL games in the top 6 and top 9 of the team in the future. I like Jacob Battaglia's potential as maybe a bottom 6 guy in the future. Eric Jamieson might turn out to be a player. I would not be surprised to see 6 of these guys playing NHL games at some point in the future. And if you have an NHL draft class with 6 players in it that are playing for your team, it's an excellent, excellent draft class. If you liked the video, be sure to go to the description and check out our Fanatics affiliate link, where anything you buy in the store will give us a small kickback, or you could go to Scouching.ca, where a subscription gets you access to a private Discord server, data tables for drafted and undrafted prospects around the league that you won't find anywhere else, as well as insights into the hand-tracked data that I track. So with that, we'll see you in the next one where we look at the LA Kings.